Hello and welcome to CrossTalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're talking about Pakistan's instability. But before, let's see how Pakistan is ranked when it comes to terrorism.
A failed state? Pakistan's economic situation has deteriorated to the brink of collapse during 2010. And now, with the assassination of Salman Taseer, the political situation reaches the point of despair for the major ruling party. According to the Maplecroft, Pakistan is world's second terrorism risk country, while Somalia is at the top. Iraq and Afghanistan follow Pakistan on the terrorism risk index list. Thus, there is an ongoing frustration that Pakistani officials are not doing enough to combat terrorist groups in the country's tribal areas. And the Obama administration has decided to offer Pakistan more military, intelligence, and economic support and to intensify U.S. efforts to forge a regional peace. Peter?
Okay, Dan, I'd like to go to you. I mean, the headline always is this, is that the Pakistanis aren't doing enough. Okay, that's what the American perspective is here. And of course, it's dealing with the tribal areas and on the border of Afghanistan. But, I mean, logically speaking, from the Pakistani point of view, they know the Americans are not going to stay forever in Afghanistan, and they want to make sure that they have a stake in the outcome of whatever the outcome is, because the Americans will not stay forever. I mean, why doesn't the Americans understand that? Because it's Pakistan's backyard. That's their region, and they want to have they have a stake in the outcome of what's going to happen in Afghanistan. I mean, the United States cannot determine that alone.
I think I'm going to go back to what Robert was saying earlier. The Americans just do not understand the region. As you said rightly, Pakistan has done more than enough. This is the public view in Pakistan, that we've done more than enough. We've lost more soldiers than the US and NATO combined. We've lost more civilians than many other countries combined, and we've done more than enough. Now, what Pakistan has started to do now, and if it isn't doing, it should be doing, is to look out for its own interests in the region. And we know that the war is not going to go on forever. If it's not going to be, anytime soon, then it's probably going to be 2014 or, not long after that. And we have to stay here. So Pakistan, if they're not doing this, they should be doing this. They should be looking out for their interests in Afghanistan, and they should be ensuring that the next government that comes into Afghanistan is one that does not allow India the space that it currently enjoys, and which it uses to destabilize Pakistan by channeling weapons and money into Pakistani territory. And we've seen, in fact, recently, I think it was last month, that a senior Baloch terrorist was caught red-handed trying to smuggle in weapons. He's still in jail. He's one of the buktis. And this is the clearest evidence that there can be every major terrorist attack in Pakistan can be linked directly back to Afghanistan. So that is the problem, and Pakistan should do whatever it takes to ensure that once the US does pull out, Afghanistan does not become it goes back to what it used to be before the U.S. occupation, which was secure, on our western borders were secure. There was no terrorism coming into Pakistan from Afghan soil, and we need to go back to that.
Okay, what do you think about that, Robert? Because
can I
okay,
jump in
Lisa,
there?
Go ahead. Crosstalk rules, jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that Pakistan should look after its own security interests, but I think Pakistani leaders need to ask themselves whether providing a permissive environment for militant groups that are increasingly turning their guns on the Pakistani state is really the best way to move forward and ensure their own regional security and position. But look, the U.S. also has to look after its security interests, and it also needs a friendly government in Afghanistan that will not provide al-Qaeda safe haven so that it can conduct another terrorist attack like it did on 9/11. So I think the key here is bringing U.S. and Pakistan security interests into alignment, with each side recognizing it has legitimate security interests in Afghanistan.
Okay, Robert, I heard you sigh. Go ahead.
Yeah, I sighed because it's typical of the Heritage Foundation to think that Pakistan is another American country. It's not. I like going to Pakistan.
I didn't say that, Robert. I didn't say that.
I know who.
Yeah.
May I finish speaking, please? Would you just let me finish speaking?
Go ahead, Robert.
Would you permit me to finish what I want to say?
Go ahead, Robert.
Thank you. I'm one of the few foreigners I know who actually likes Pakistan, not because of our British Empire, which caused it many problems and caused it great grief and great suffering. I think that Pakistan has many problems it has to deal with. Economically, corruption, for example. It's a very corrupt country. Every policeman I meet in Pakistan wants to shake me down for money. Every government official in Pakistan seems to be corrupt. I'm not a friend of the Pakistani authorities, but I do like Pakistan. I think Pakistanis are a very intelligent, well-read people, and I think they know the history of their country much better than the Heritage Foundation does, and probably better than I do. I think that Pakistan deserves justice. If I may just finish speaking, if that's permitted by the Heritage Foundation.
Okay, Robert, go ahead.
I think it deserves justice yeah, thank you. I think it deserves justice in Kashmir. And I think that the history of Afghanistan, particularly with the Durrand Line, which you will know all about. Mortimer Durrand was the man who drew the frontier between what is now Pakistan and what is now Afghanistan. I think that there is a great sorrow there, and I think that many people in Pakistan who are Pashtun would feel that they are also Afghans, and you know the story of the fact that the Pashtuns are in fact Afghans. I think that your story that you're telling is very good, but I don't think you're telling the full story, and I think that Russian listeners would understand it very well. All I will say is that I think that Pakistan is not treated fairly, and we should treat it fairly, and we must do so. And talk of corruption and so on, which is completely correct. Of course, it's corrupt. It's totally corrupt. Pakistan is a very corrupt country, and its police force is corrupt, and its army is corrupt, and its intelligence service is corrupt. I will say all these things, and they are true.
Okay.
But I think that that is not the whole story, and I don't think you're telling the whole story.
Lisa, Dan said earlier in the program that Pakistan has done enough. How do you reflect upon that? Because from its point of view of what it's been doing, helping America fight its war on, so-called war on terror, Robert, what do you think? I mean, the Pakistanis have, as Dan pointed out, lost more people involved in this. I mean, their economy was never in really good shape, and now it's even worse. And you have a lot more radicalization within the country, and a lot of people say it all goes back to America's war on terror.
Yeah, well, first let me say, I also share Robert's fondness for Pakistan. I served there as a diplomat in the mid-90s. In fact, the month after I arrived, a group that nobody had heard about before called the Taliban was taking over in Kandahar, had just embarked in Kandahar, Afghanistan. And let me just say that Pakistan, I don't believe that if a liberal governor like Salman Taseer was murdered, that there would be any support for that murder. So unfortunately, I think Pakistan, we are seeing a rising wave of extremism. We can talk about, why that is and what that might relate to in terms of the war in Afghanistan. But I think the fact is we would all like to see Pakistan prosper and be able to be a part of civilized society. And that is what we are working toward. And in terms of what Pakistan is doing in the war on terrorism, yes, it has lost over 2,500 soldiers in this fight since 9/11, fighting in the tribal areas. Many people don't realize that thousands of Pakistani civilians have been killed in terrorist attacks throughout Pakistan. So Pakistan is suffering from this regional terrorism that we see. But at the same time, I think there is some ambiguity within the Pakistan security establishment on the best way to deal with militancy. And there are some in the security establishment who believe that the Taliban could serve Pakistan's interest again in Afghanistan if, as you say, the Americans depart the region before it is stabilized. And that is why I think it was a mistake for President Obama to announce that the U.S. would begin withdrawing forces in June 2011. I believe that was a mistake. I believe the administration realizes that was a mistake and is now backing away from that date and is now talking about 2014 as the end of combat operations, but also making clear that the U.S. will have a strong commitment to Afghanistan over the long term, that it will not be leaving the region like it did in the early 90s after the Soviets departed.
Okay, Dan, what do you think about that? I mean, you know, we keep going back to all the woes of Pakistan, at least currently, and it goes all the way back to the American occupation of Afghanistan. Kashmir was thrown in here, too. But the effective end of the occupation of Afghanistan would be a net positive for everybody in the region. Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
I think it's the matter of the win that will eventually dictate what happens next. And the thing is, I kind of agree with what Lisa was saying earlier about the Pakistan security interests and those of the United States need to be in tune. And my point is that Pakistan has done more than what it has been asked for or has been required in the past 10 years. But Pakistan's legitimate security concerns have not been addressed. And that includes the Indian presence in Afghanistan. They need to be put a leash on. That includes fixing at least pressurizing India on the human rights violations in Kashmir. The issue won't be fixed straight away, but at least the least they could have done was last summer we had over 200 students, youngsters killed in the streets by Indian gunmen, Indian paramilitary soldiers, and there's not a word of condemnation from the U.S.
All right.
And recently we've seen
gentlemen and lady, I'm going to have to jump in
military.
here. Many thanks to my guests today in Beirut, Dubai, and in Washington. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.